Hi, I'm 7 Foot Geek, and this is The View from the Clouds. Today is Friday, January the 15th, and I gotta finish up my talk about board games. That's what today is. Today we're going to be talking about what makes a good board game, and I'm going to be using the board game Pandemic to explain this. But first things first, Pandemic isn't nearly as well known as Monopoly, so I'm going to cut away and show you Pandemic. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome to my dining room. This is Pandemic. Pandemic is a game created by Matt Leacock and distributed by Zedman Games. I'm sorry, Americans, it will always be Zedman, no matter what you try to say to me. The game is set up on the premise that there are 4 super viruses that have come into the world, and you, as the players, are attempting to find cures and manage the disease. The board is set up to show hotspots throughout the world, separated by color to represent the 4 viruses. And the beginning of the game has the board set up with different cities with 3, 2, and 1 cube representing the spread of the disease throughout the world. Now, each player chooses a role. The roles let people break the rules of the game. They let them effectively have superpowers to do things. On each turn, the order of play, a player gets to do 4 things, draw 2 player cards, resolve them, and then infect cities. At the bottom of this display, you can see a small counter which tells you how many city cards you flip over to determine infections. The player's actions, there are 8 different possibilities of things that they can do to move around the board, treat the diseases, or attempt to research a cure. In the player deck, there are city cards which players accumulate in order to find a cure. 5 city cards of any one color allows you to cure that color of disease. There are also event cards, which let you do powerful things throughout the course of the game. Now, it may not seem like it's very dangerous. As you flip through the infection pile, each city appears only once. However, hidden within the player deck are these epidemic cards. And what these do is that when they come up, the infection tracker moves up. The already played infection cards get shuffled and then placed back on top of the infection deck. Thus meaning that places around the world which already have disease can be reinfected. Now, as an additional wrinkle, cities that have 3 cubes of any one color cannot receive more. When they come back up in the infection deck, what occurs is an outbreak, tracked by this section down at the bottom. And what happens in an outbreak is that each city that's connected by a line, which you can see on the board here, receives 1 cube of that color. If you get 8 outbreaks, you lose. If you run out of cards in the player deck, you lose. If you have insufficient cubes in supply to satisfy an infection, you lose. If you're able to cure all 4 diseases by collecting 5 of each color, then you win. That's Pandemic in a nutshell. Now let's go back to my office. We're back. So, Pandemic is a well-designed board game. But why? How do we know this? To begin with, it's a cooperative game. That isn't necessarily points in its favor or against it, but the idea that every single player is working together in order to win is something that increases the agency of the people playing the game. As I mentioned in my video about Monopoly, one of the flaws of Monopoly is that it has essentially no agency for the players. They have no choice in what is going on. Pandemic requires cooperation and interaction with your fellow players. Each player has their set of actions, and then the cities are infected every single turn. That means that they need to maintain an open line of communication with their fellow players so that they can manage, treat, and eventually cure the diseases in the world. How this occurs is that each player has a set number of actions. Everybody gets 4 actions. And there is a variety of options that they have to choose from. They may move around the board. They may use their role's superpowers that let them do something special or exceptional. They may treat diseases in the region that they're in. They may attempt to build research stations so that other people may cure diseases. There's all sorts of things that a player has options to do within those 4 actions. And what that means is that by understanding what the other players are doing, it increases the number of options and the choices that that player has to make on his or her turn. Every single turn, what occurs is entirely reflective of the choices that a player makes. Now, to make this a game and to introduce conflict, the random element is the nature of the player and the infection decks. The players do not know when the epidemic cards will appear within the player decks. They are randomly distributed before the start of the game. So there's a great deal of uncertainty about when that's going to happen next. When is the infection deck going to get put back on top? And the infection deck itself is randomized. You shuffle the deck up at the start of the game, so you're never completely sure what cities are going to come up next. If you've recently had an epidemic, then there might be the same city that comes up that has 3 cubes on it, adding another outbreak, increasing the danger around the rest of the world, adding more cubes to the board, making it more worrisome if that disease is going to become out of control, reflected by whether or not you have enough cubes to be able to satisfy an infection. So every turn that there's an infection, the players then must respond and react to this change in the board state. It's not a static game, it is changing constantly. So from one turn to the next, the players need to determine how they can best use their abilities together to keep the world safe. Now, I love Pandemic. It is one of my favorite games. I happen to really enjoy cooperative games. But Pandemic itself has a lot of the examples of how you create agency within a game, how you create situations where the actions of a player are used to manage and mitigate the random elements that are necessary within a board game. So I hope that that was informative for most of you. I could probably talk for hours about this game, but that in a nutshell is what makes it an excellent, excellent game. If you have any questions, I hope this spurs some discussion. Please post them in the comments below. And if you like this video, like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I've been 7 Foot Geek, and this is The View from the Clouds.